I'm really proud of you. It was nice to not sweat one out, right? It was nice to come in and to have high energy, right? To play together, to continue to build on a lead. Ty? It's the ultimate. I hope you understand it's the ultimate compliment that we can trust you to start you in a game and to play you these kind of minutes and to know that you're going to show up.
A head coach just won a basketball game. Her team beat a depleted opponent. Victory should feel good. Victory should feel normal. But when you watch the post-game locker room footage, something becomes impossible to ignore.
By the way, you guys know I watch the ticket sales. I've long history of me doing videos and showing you guys ticket sales. The great majority of the tickets for this game were sold prior to the Mercury game the other night. Why? It's simple. Kate Martin plays for the Los Angeles Sparks, and people thought they were finally going to get the Caitlin Clark Kate Martin reunion game tonight, and they didn't get that.
The moment Stephanie White starts talking about her team's performance without one specific player on the floor, her entire body transforms. Her eyes light up, her voice gets louder, her shoulders relax in a way they clear.
This was the look 5 minutes before the game, okay? Right here, you can see there were a ton of tickets. A ton of tickets. Now, or a ton of empty seats, tickets. A ton of empty seats. Right up here, 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 right up here. Luckily, somebody had a bootleg stream going on YouTube, and I tuned in for the first 2 or 3 minutes just to be able to see seats. Most of these seats got filled up. Okay, I'm not going to come on here and blow smoke up your asses. Most of them
really don't at any other moment all season. She's visibly, undeniably happier, more relieved, more genuinely enthusiastic than she's been in weeks. And here's what makes this moment so revealing. That one specific player is...
If the CBS ratings come back and they're less than, let's say, 1.4 million, well, didn't they just have a nationally televised game that was like 2.5 million viewers? If last night's game comes in at less than 1.5 million viewers, then yeah, a hell of a lot of people tuned out. And we all know in sports, it is the media rights deal where the money is made. You want to hit a team and a league in the pocketbook, you don't turn the TV on.
Caitlin Clark, the franchise superstar, the generational talent, the only reason millions of people are even watching the WNBA right now. And her own head coach just broadcast to the entire world that she's more comfortable coaching without her. This single moment unravels everything about what's really happening inside the Indiana Fever organization, and it all connects to something much bigger. Something that could fundamentally change the future of this entire league.
Kate Martin plays for the Los Angeles Sparks, and people thought they were finally going to get the Caitlin Clark Kate Martin reunion game tonight, and they didn't get that. I know we talked a lot about a boycott. I never expected that to show in the attendance. I didn't. Where it's going to show is the television ratings, which is where it counts. All right, ticket sales are great, and yeah, we very much take note when there's 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 fans missing. But people have bought tickets to try to see this right here.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
The locker room celebration after barely defeating a heavily depleted Los Angeles Sparks team should have been subdued, measured, maybe even tinged with some frustration. After all, the Indiana Fever had just squeaked out a win against opponents missing key contributors like Daka Ham.
Was that your first career three, right?
Yeah.
Oh, really good team win. I'm proud of you guys. Get a couple days to get some rest.
Okay. Oh, Kelsey Mitchell's happy. She's happy. She scored like 26 points last night. Of course she's happy. Look at this. Evelyn DR posted this, and we saw it just now. Stephanie White was on the verge of tears talking about Ty Harris's performance.
And Kelsey Plum. This wasn't supposed to be a marquee victory. This was supposed to be a statement game about their depth and their ability to win without needing one specific person to carry them. But the moment you watch Stephanie White's post-game address, something becomes impossible to ignore. The head coach's entire
teeth in the dentist office. Let's just be real. It takes everything in her soul to give Caitlin Clark a compliment. Last year, you witnessed what Stephanie White wanted. And again, I think last year's run in the long term is going to hurt Caitlin Clark's existence with the Fever and or Stephanie White's existence. One of the two will not be on the team. Caitlin Clark will either be like, F it, I'm fed up, I want to be traded, or Stephanie White's going to get run out. And if I own an organization, your ass is hitting the bricks. I'm not losing Caitlin Clark under any circumstances.
her demeanor, her energy, her body language, everything about her presence in that locker room completely transforms the second she stops talking about basic basketball execution and shifts focus to how incredible her team looked without a particular player on the floor. Her eyes light up. Her voice gets louder, more confident, more genuinely enthusiastic. Her shoulders relax in a way they clearly don't when she's discussing other situations. It's palpable relief mixed with undeniable joy. And anyone who spent even 5 minutes analyzing body language in competitive sports knows exactly what that means. This is a coach who just got handed the specific scenario she's been waiting for all season long. But before we dive into that post-game moment, we need to back up and understand exactly why this particular game mattered so much to so many people in the first place. The Indiana Fever versus Los Angeles Sparks matchup on May 9th, 2025 was positioned as a massive primetime CBS event. We're talking the kind of nationally televised slot that the league saves for games they genuinely believe will move the needle in terms of viewership. These are the broadcasts that get promoted heavily across all their social media channels. These are the games where the networks expect to pull in serious numbers. We're talking somewhere in that 2 to 2.5 million viewer range based on recent WNBA performance. That's the threshold for what constitutes a successful primetime basketball broadcast in today's media landscape. The league had every reason to believe this particular game would hit those benchmarks. The storyline was perfect. The marketing practically sold itself. All of the major talking points were already in place. Here's the thing though, if you actually look at when most of the tickets for this game got purchased, you'll discover something fascinating from a business perspective. The overwhelming majority of those seat sales happened days before the actual game. Days, not hours, days before the Phoenix Mercury matchup earlier that week, before anyone in the public domain really knew that anything unusual might happen. Those tickets were locked in based on one single specific narrative that fans desperately wanted to witness. Kate Martin plays for the Los Angeles Sparks. Caitlin Clark played for the Indiana Fever. And millions of basketball fans all across the country were hoping against hope that they'd finally get to see that perfect storm of storyline come together on a professional basketball court. The Iowa reunion, the connection between two incredibly talented players who won everything together at the collegiate level, who had built a genuine friendship over years of grinding through tough games and celebrating victories together. That's what moved the needle. That's what got casual fans willing to drop serious money on expensive tickets at Friday night game. It wasn't some philosophical appreciation for the nuances of Stephanie White's half-court defensive schemes. It wasn't deep analysis about transition pace or acceptable shot selection parameters. It was the emotional connection, the authentic relationship, two friends who'd accomplished so much together finally matching up on a professional stage. Now, the WNBA as an organization should have recognized this. They should have absolutely capitalized on this organic, ready-made narrative. Think about it from a purely logical marketing standpoint. If the league had even a shred of modern promotional sense, they would have been hammering this storyline across every possible platform. Kate Martin, Lucy Olson, every single player who ever put on an Iowa jersey alongside Caitlin Clark would have been featured prominently in the build-up to this game. That's built-in audience engagement that already exists. You don't have to manufacture it. You don't have to create fake drama or force artificial narratives. It's already there waiting to be activated. Fans are already emotionally invested. Thousands upon thousands of casual basketball watchers would have tuned in specifically for that Iowa connection. That's free marketing leverage that most leagues dream about. But instead, the WNBA largely ignored it. They treated it like a total afterthought. The broader sports media landscape picked up on the storyline more prominently than the league's own promotional apparatus, which tells you something important about the organization's strategic priorities right now. Fast forward to 5 minutes before tip-off. The game hasn't even started yet. The players haven't taken the court. But if you look at the wide-angle camera shots from inside the arena, you'll see something that would ordinarily be embarrassing for a nationally televised broadcast. Entire sections of seats sitting completely empty, whole rows vacant, upper deck areas that look like ghost towns, not a scattered seat here and there. We're talking substantial pockets of vacancy throughout the building. Now, to be completely fair and honest about it, most of those empty seats did eventually fill up as the game got closer to starting. People did show up to the arena. But here's the critical distinction that almost everyone in the media landscape is completely missing. Here's the detail that changes absolutely everything about how we should interpret what happened this week. Physically showing up to an arena and actually choosing to watch a game on television are two completely different metrics with entirely different business implications. See, those arena tickets were purchased and paid for days before Caitlin Clark was announced as unavailable. Those are what economists call sunk costs. The fans who bought those tickets faced a difficult choice. Either they eat the financial loss and stay home, or they show up to the arena anyway, hoping that whatever happens on the court will still provide some entertainment value. But television ratings, that's a completely different ballgame. That's real-time, authentic, completely honest measurement of actual fan interest and engagement happening in real time. That's millions of people actively making the choice to spend their precious Friday night watching one specific game instead of doing literally anything else with their weekend. They could be going out, they could be streaming other content, they could be spending time with family or friends, but they're choosing to turn on the television and watch this particular broadcast. And when those final Nielsen numbers come back from CBS, if they come back significantly under the 2.5 million viewers that the league just pulled for their previous national broadcast, that's going to tell a story that's far more meaningful than gate receipts ever could. Here's where most casual sports fans fundamentally misunderstand how professional sports economics actually work at the highest level. The arena attendance, while it certainly matters to some degree, is honestly a secondary concern compared to television ratings. Yes, Empty seats on a broadcast are embarrassing. Yes, they definitely hurt concession revenue for that night. They absolutely impact local arena sponsorship deals and vendor revenue. But here's the brutal truth about where professional sports leagues actually make their real franchise-altering money. It's not at the gate. It's not in merchandise sales, it's in the media rights deals. Those multi-billion-dollar television contracts with ESPN, TNT, NBC, that's where the genuine money lives. That's how a league funds player salaries. That's how franchises remain financially viable. That's the foundation that allows these organizations to invest in their facilities, their coaching staffs, their talent development. And the television networks evaluating whether to sign those enormous checks aren't looking at Friday night gate receipts. They're analyzing Nielsen ratings. They're studying sustained viewership numbers across the entire season. They're asking the fundamental question, will regular people actually watch this product consistently enough to make our investment worthwhile? So when we're evaluating the impact of last Friday's game, the real story isn't going to be told by the fact that the arena eventually filled up. The real story is going to be written in television viewership numbers. If that game pulled in 900,000 viewers instead of 2.5 million, that might seem like just another data point to a casual sports fan. But from a media rights negotiation perspective, that single game just cost the WNBA millions of dollars in future leverage. The networks will remember that. They'll factor it into their calculations. They'll use it as justification for lower salary cap projections and reduced investment going forward. This is the kind of impact that compounds over time. Now, what exactly was happening in that locker room speech that makes this whole situation so revealing? What can we actually glean from Stephanie White's reaction to winning a game without her franchise superstar on the floor? Listen to her tone, watch her body language, pay attention to how she addresses the room. She leads with the standard congratulatory sentiment, the basics, great job, I'm really proud of you. That's normal coaching speak. That's what you'd expect any head coach to say after a victory, but then she says something that becomes impossible to unhear once you know what to listen for. She says, "It was nice to not sweat one out, right?" Those 7 words tell you absolutely everything you need to understand about the current dynamic in that locker room. Think about what that statement actually means. She's saying that when her franchise superstar is on the floor, when the single most important offensive player in her entire system is running the show, that somehow constitutes a stressful situation. That's something you have to endure rather than celebrate. That's friction rather than synergy. That's apparently viewed as a complication that needs to be managed rather than an incredible generational asset that should be embraced and featured prominently. Compare that to her immediate reaction when she starts discussing Tyrese Harris's performance. You'll see her visibly get emotional. She's on the verge of tears talking about a role player's standard performance in a messy win against a heavily depleted opponent. She says, "I hope you understand. It's the ultimate compliment that we can trust you to start you in a game and to play you these kind of minutes and to know that you're going to show up." She's getting genuinely choked up discussing a role player's standard execution. Now contrast that with how Stephanie White reacts when Caitlin Clark delivers a genuinely elite performance. When Clark drops 30 points and 10 assists on someone's head, when she orchestrates the entire offense at an MVP level, White's compliments sound like they're being painfully extracted with rusty pliers. The enthusiasm is noticeably muted. The energy is restrained. The emotional investment clearly isn't there. And here's the thing. This isn't some subtle pattern that you have to really squint hard to see. This isn't something that requires deep analysis and reading between the lines to understand the hidden meaning. It's playing out right there in bright lights in front of everyone watching. It's broadcast for millions of people to observe. Stephanie White coaches one very specific way when Clark is on the floor. She acts in a completely different, noticeably more relaxed, more enthusiastic way when Clark is not playing. The entire energy of the room changes. The baseline enthusiasm changes. The entire psychological dynamic of how she interacts with her team shifts dramatically. Let's play devil's advocate for a moment and try to construct a reasonable basketball explanation for this attitude. Maybe, theoretically, there's a legitimate philosophical difference about how the game should be played. Maybe Stephanie White's highly rigid offensive system genuinely doesn't mesh seamlessly with Caitlin Clark's skill set, even though that premise seems absolutely absurd given the documented fact that Clark is widely considered one of the most versatile and lethal offensive players in the entire sport of basketball. Maybe there's some deep fundamental disagreement about transition pace or floor spacing or acceptable shot selection. Maybe those differences truly are irreconcilable from a basketball philosophy standpoint. But if that's genuinely the case, if those core philosophical differences are really just about basketball systems and coaching methodology, then as an organization, the Indiana Fever needs to have a very honest, very uncomfortable conversation about whether Stephanie White is actually the right head coach for this specific roster moving forward. Because here's exactly what we know from watching last season's success. Here's what the recent history tells us. The Indiana Fever made an absolutely incredible, genuinely magical playoff run last year. They went from being the absolute laughingstock punching bag of the entire league to becoming a terrifying, legitimate playoff team in the span of just one single season. That kind of turnaround doesn't happen by accident. That's not dumb luck. That's not some random variation. That's exactly what happens when a franchise makes the smart decision to build their entire strategy around their absolute best player. They played incredibly fast last season. They constantly pushed the tempo. They let Caitlin Clark take the reins and orchestrate the entire offense. They gave her the creative freedom to dynamically create high-quality opportunities for everyone else. And you know what? It worked beautifully, spectacularly well, actually. But something fundamentally changed this season. The offense became noticeably more structured, more rigid, more predictable, more hyper-focused on getting very specific role players their specific looks, rather than letting the natural game flow organically. You can visibly see the mounting frustration in Clark's body language when these highly structured plays break down. You can see the flash of irritation when the floor spacing is completely jammed up. She's way too much of a consummate professional to complain about it publicly to the media, but the subtle signs are absolutely there if you're paying close enough attention to the broadcasts. So where exactly does this franchise go from here? Because the reality is brutally simple. There are only two possible outcomes moving forward. Both of them carry absolutely massive franchise-altering implications. Either Caitlin Clark eventually reaches her breaking point and officially requests a trade out of Indiana, or Stephanie White gets fired by the front office. There is no magical third option. There's no scenario where they just hold hands and figure it all out and everything suddenly works perfectly forever. The interpersonal tension is just too glaringly obvious. The core philosophical differences are too fundamental. The misalignment is too visible. And if you're sitting in the Indiana Fever's ownership box right now, this should be the single easiest business decision you will ever have to make in your professional life. You do not, under any possible circumstances, ever willingly lose Caitlin Clark. You don't even entertain the remote possibility of letting her walk or trading her away. She's not just your best statistical player. She's not just the smiling face of your local franchise in Indianapolis. She is literally the reason your massive arena consistently sells out every single night. She is the reason these giant television networks want to broadcast your games in prime time. She is the sole reason that millions of casual sports fans, people who'd never watched a single WNBA game in their entire lives before this, suddenly know exactly who the Indiana Fever are. Consider what happened this past week from a pure engagement standpoint. The massive online controversy around Clark unexpectedly sitting out generated significantly more views and debate on sports commentary channels than literally anything else happening in the WNBA right now. This particular channel saw its highest traffic spike in months just covering this single situation. And it wasn't just one channel. Countless other content creators covering this exact same story experienced the exact same massive spike in their analytics. Let's be completely real. That's not because the general public is super deeply invested in the nuances of Stephanie White's coaching philosophy or the intricacies of the Fever's weak side defensive rotations. It's solely because anything and everything involving Caitlin Clark automatically drives massive audience engagement at a level that this league has literally never seen before in its entire history. Yet despite all of that overwhelming evidence, there are still people deeply entrenched within the organization and within the broader league office who seem to actively resent that undeniable fact. These are people who seem to genuinely wish that the media attention was distributed much more evenly across the board. They desperately want other players to magically get that same spotlight. They clearly wish that the overarching narrative of the sport wasn't so completely dominated by just one single person. And look, I understand that sentiment. If we're being totally honest, that's a really lovely democratic idea in theory. It's a nice utopian vision when you're drawing it up on a whiteboard. But the harsh reality is that's simply not how professional sports actually work in the real world. It's definitely not how cutthroat media economics function, and continuing to pretend otherwise is just self-destructive for everyone involved. The WNBA had a genuine once-in-a-lifetime chance to capitalize on the massive Caitlin Clark phenomenon. They had a real opportunity to ride that tidal wave and intelligently use her star power to fundamentally elevate the entire league's financial position. Instead, we consistently see bizarre situations exactly like this one. We see a head coach who somehow seems visibly happier and more relaxed when her franchise superstar isn't even playing. We see squeezing out ugly wins without that player feeling like a personal validation for the coach, rather than a major cause for concern. We see an underlying message being broadcast, whether intentional or not, that the rigid offensive system matters significantly more than the generational superstar. Now let's actually examine what happened this week from a medical standpoint, because the official injury narrative they released absolutely deserves some deep critical scrutiny. First, the team cited a back injury, then a throat injury, then they added a groin injury on top of that. We're talking about a whole lot of simultaneous ailments suddenly piling up for a 23-year-old elite professional athlete who has already proven she can play through heavy physical contact all season long. Yes, Aaliyah Boston did foul her incredibly hard in that previous game. That physical contact definitely happened, but the decision to completely sit Clark for a highly promoted, nationally televised primetime game against a team specifically featuring her beloved former Iowa teammate, that raises serious questions that deserve examination. Is it technically possible that all these various injuries are 100% legitimate and the medical staff made the smart conservative call for her long-term health? Absolutely. Yes, it's entirely possible. But is it also highly possible that there were other, more complicated underlying factors involved in this decision-making process? Also, absolutely yes. And given absolutely everything we've witnessed this entire season, given the clear pattern of how Stephanie White interacts with Clark on the sidelines versus how warmly she interacts with the rest of the supporting roster, it's not unreasonable to wonder whether this absence was purely objective medical decision-making. Here's the absolute truth about professional sports at the highest level. Star players play hurt literally all the time. That's not some wild, controversial statement. That's just the everyday reality of being a professional athlete. Minor nagging injuries get wrapped up and managed behind the scenes constantly. A certain level of daily pain gets tolerated and pushed through. This is especially true for massive games that actually matter to fans and networks. For high-stakes games that carry major cultural and financial significance way beyond just another mark in the win-loss column. A massive national television game against a highly popular opponent packed with major pre-existing storylines in history? That's exactly the kind of marquee game where you'd fully expect a franchise player to tape it up and push through the pain unless the injury is so severe that it genuinely prevents them from being effective on the court. The highly convenient timing here is what makes this situation feel suspicious. The Fever had just come off a grueling schedule stretch where Clark was getting absolutely brutalized by opposing defenses. That rough Aaliyah Boston incident was just the most recent publicized example in a long line of them. She's been getting blatantly hacked, grabbed, face-guarded, and physically intimidated by veterans all season long, and the league officiating has been wildly inconsistent at best when it comes to protecting her, so when she finally sits out a game, when those minor injuries accumulate to the breaking point, it just so happens to be for one of the absolute biggest marquee television matchups of the entire regular season. And Stephanie White's reaction? It wasn't deep concern for her player. It definitely wasn't visible frustration about losing her best offensive weapon for a massive primetime game. No, it was palpable relief, genuine, undeniable excitement. It looked like she saw it as a golden opportunity to finally run the team exactly the way she's always wanted to, completely without having to scheme around or accommodate the one generational player responsible for the franchise's entire cultural and financial resurgence. The final television ratings for this game are going to tell us absolutely everything about where the WNBA stands right now as a business. If those Nielsen numbers come back incredibly strong, if millions of people tuned in despite knowing well in advance that Clark was out, then maybe the league office has successfully built enough general interest that it can sustain massive viewership without constantly relying on one star player. That would be a positive foundational sign for the league's long-term viability. But if the ratings completely crater, if we see a catastrophic drop from the usual 2.5 million viewers down to under 1 million, then the league has a very serious structural problem. Because a drop like that mathematically confirms what skeptical people already suspect. The vast, overwhelming majority of the WNBA's explosive recent growth is directly and undeniably attributable to Caitlin Clark alone. When she's not physically on the screen, that massive casual audience instantly disappears and turns the channel. And before anyone rushes to the comments with the real true fans watch regardless argument, let me stop you there. Real hardcore fans are absolutely great for the sport. Dedicated, passionate fans who religiously watch every game and know every bench player are undeniably the cultural backbone of any sports league. But let's be completely honest with the math. There's simply not enough to sustain a modern billion-dollar professional sports league financially. You absolutely need casual fans to survive. You desperately need everyday people who only tune in occasionally when there's hype, who buy the expensive jerseys for their kids, who consistently drive primetime television ratings enough to make media rights deals lucrative for networks. The NBA doesn't generate billions solely on hardcore basketball purists watching every Tuesday night regular season game. It survives on millions of casual fans who only tune in for Lakers games, or when LeBron is playing, or when the playoffs roll around. The NFL doesn't get record-breaking television contracts because diehards watch ugly Thursday night games between teams casual fans don't care about. They get those contracts because millions of casual fans predictably watch Cowboys games and Chiefs games and whatever team has the most exciting superstar quarterback. The WNBA's business reality is absolutely no different. And right now, their one undeniable needle-moving superstar is Caitlin Clark. She's the solitary player who consistently brings massive, lucrative casual audiences. She's the generational player who makes millions of people who don't normally watch women's basketball tune in just to see what all the cultural hype is about. And if the higher-ups in the league, if general managers and head coaches don't fundamentally understand that basic economic reality and build their entire strategy around it, they're making a historically catastrophic strategic error. Here's what makes this situation particularly frustrating to watch unfold. This didn't have to be this complicated or filled with drama. The winning blueprint was already proven from last season's success. You just enthusiastically build your entire infrastructure around Caitlin Clark. You hand her the keys and let her completely run the offense. You surround her with highly complementary athletic role players who can knock down open shots, cut hard to the basket, and finish the plays she creates. You intentionally play incredibly fast, high-octane basketball because transition is when she's absolutely most dangerous. You give her ultimate creative freedom because creating mind-bending offensive opportunities is exactly what she does, better than literally anyone else in the league. And it worked beautifully. The Fever went from completely irrelevant bottom dwellers to a terrifying, highly competitive playoff team in one season. Arena attendance skyrocketed beyond belief. National television ratings went through the roof, breaking all-time records. The franchise went from being a forgotten afterthought to the most talked about culturally relevant team in the entire league. And it all happened because they drafted the right generational player and smartly got out of her way. But this current season, it genuinely feels like there's been a deliberate, stubborn effort by the coaching staff to do the exact opposite of that proven formula, to rigidly impose strict structure, to purposely limit fast break possessions, to forcefully make Clark fit into a pre-existing system rather than intelligently build a dynamic system around her unique strengths. Maybe that's just Stephanie White's core, unshakable coaching philosophy. Maybe she genuinely believes that a slower, more rigidly structured half-court offense is the absolute only path to championship-level basketball. But here's what's very clear. If that coaching philosophy actively conflicts with maximizing the talent of your once-in-a-generation franchise player, then your philosophy is flat out wrong for this team. Because here's the cold, hard reality. The Indiana Fever are absolutely not winning a WNBA championship anytime soon without Caitlin Clark playing freely at an MVP level. That's not some controversial hot take. That's just an honest basketball assessment of where this roster's talent level actually stands. They simply don't have the overwhelming bench depth. They don't have the elite, switchable defensive versatility to lock down top teams. They don't have the gritty veteran championship experience. What they do have is a literal generational offensive talent who can entirely single-handedly make their overall offense elite, but only when actually allowed to operate freely and create magic. So when head coach Stephanie White noticeably seems more comfortable, more genuinely enthusiastic, and visibly happier coaching a highly depleted version of this team that doesn't even include Clark on the floor, that's a massive, flashing red flag for the front office. That's a glaring indication that the head coach and franchise player are fundamentally not on the same page about what this team's identity should be moving forward. And historically, when that kind of deep philosophical rift happens in professional sports, somebody eventually has to pack their bags and go. The much broader, more concerning question here is really about the entire WNBA's complicated, often toxic relationship with massive star power. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just an isolated incident about Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark. This is indicative of a much deeper league-wide cultural problem that seems incredibly uncomfortable with individual star players becoming significantly bigger and more recognizable than the collective league itself. It's a culture that actively seems to resent it when one specific player gets a disproportionate amount of media attention, even when that attention directly financially benefits every single person involved. You can plainly see it in the passive-aggressive way other players occasionally talk about Clark in press conferences. You can absolutely see it in how the broader sports media complex chooses to frame and cover her. And here's what makes this dynamic so particularly frustrating from a business perspective. This whole situation absolutely didn't have to unfold this way. The WNBA had a proven roadmap for success sitting right there, tested and validated by last season's incredible results. All the league had to do was follow it, Build around your best player, give her the ball, let her create, surround her with complementary pieces who finish what she starts, play fast, embrace transition, reward her with freedom and trust. That system took the Fever from irrelevance to playoff contention in 1 year. It generated unprecedented viewership numbers. It turned Indianapolis into a basketball hotbed overnight. But somewhere along the way, someone in the organization decided that the system mattered more than the player, that rigid structure was more important than generational talent, that the coach's ego or philosophy or whatever's driving this shift was worth more than the franchise's entire cultural moment. And that's a fundamentally flawed calculation, because without Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever go back to being nobody. Without her, the television networks aren't interested in broadcasting these games in prime time. Without her, casual fans don't suddenly care about WNBA basketball. She's not just the best player, she's the entire reason people are paying attention to this franchise and this league at all. So the ultimate irony of Stephanie White's post-game comments, her obvious relief and happiness about winning without Clark, is that she might have just accidentally revealed exactly why she should not be the head coach of this team going forward. Because if you're genuinely more comfortable and more enthusiastic coaching without your franchise superstar on the floor, if you visibly light up when you get to implement your system without her complicating things, then you fundamentally do not understand what makes this particular team special. You don't get what the moment is. You don't recognize the historic opportunity in front of you. And in professional sports, that kind of misalignment between a head coach and their best player is not a problem that solves itself with time. It's not something that magically improves with patience and communication. It's a fundamental incompatibility that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. The Fever ownership needs to look at the evidence, watch the locker room footage, listen to White's post-game tone, observe her body language, see how she acts when Clark is playing versus when she's not. Then make the obvious decision. Protect your franchise player. Protect the generational talent who single-handedly transformed this organization. Protect the only player in the entire league who's currently driving the kind of consistent, authentic audience engagement that changes franchise economics and league trajectories. Because 5 years from now, nobody's going to remember Stephanie White's offensive system. Nobody's going to care about how rigidly structured the plays were, but they'll absolutely remember if you let Caitlin Clark walk away because you valued a coach's ego over a historic opportunity. And for the WNBA as a whole, this moment represents a critical juncture. The league finally has a generational star who's capturing mainstream cultural attention. Finally has a player whose name recognition extends way beyond just basketball fans. Finally has someone who can carry a franchise and elevate an entire sport. And the response from league leadership has been to resent it, to try to distribute that attention more evenly, to hope that other players somehow magically receive the same spotlight, to pretend that organic, authentic star power should be treated the same as manufactured narratives and forced rivalries. That's fundamentally wrong. That's cutting off your own leg to make everyone else feel shorter. That's rejecting the one asset that could have genuinely transformed the financial standing of the entire league forever. Because here's the business reality that every sports league understands. Star power sells. Authentic star power, the kind that can't be manufactured or manufactured in a boardroom, is invaluable. It's worth billions. It's the difference between a struggling league and a thriving one. It's the difference between obscurity and mainstream relevance. The WNBA had that. They had it in Caitlin Clark. And instead of celebrating it, instead of building everything around it, instead of using it as the foundation for a new era of growth and financial stability, there's been this weird, resentful, passive-aggressive pushback. It's extraordinarily self-destructive. It's cutting off your nose to spite your face. It's rejecting exactly the kind of authentic, organic success that league executives dream about, but almost never actually get. So when the Nielsen ratings come back, when the television numbers get released, when the business impact of this game becomes mathematically clear, hopefully someone in the league office will finally understand what all of us watching can already see. Caitlin Clark doesn't just matter. She's the difference between the WNBA remaining a niche product and becoming genuinely mainstream. She's the catalyst that changes everything. And teams and coaches and league executives need to recognize that, respect that, and build everything around protecting and maximizing that generational asset. Because opportunities like this don't come around very often, and when they do, you don't get a second chance to capitalize on them.